So, do we perceive reality as it is objectively, or are we limited with our five senses to a small sliver of what reality is? And what is the definition of real? Because we named reality after the word real, right? So it's a very steep subject, and we'll kind of get into it slowly here with a couple fun examples being optical illusions. Here's a perfect optical illusion example right here, where these two gray blocks are exactly the same shade, but it doesn't look like this to you. If you want to cover the middle section up with your finger, you'll see that they are in fact the same shade. This optical illusion is possible is because our biology, or our sight specifically, is designed to get us around in the 3D world, to expect shade, shapes, to navigate for survival and fitness. So we expect that light to hit it from the top. We can play a trick on our own biology with these optical illusions, and it's a small example of how we don't necessarily perceive reality objectively like we think we do. If you look deep enough into the science of it, which we'll get into here, it seems as though we don't see objective reality at all. We seem to see the sliver that fits our own survivability in the body that we have from birth. We know that there's an electromagnetic field around Earth that we can't see that protects us from radiation. And it's also known that birds can see it. Well, they can't see it like we see, even though their vision is very sharp, but they sense it in such a way that they have an extra sense that they can navigate these long migrations that they perform. So it makes you wonder, if you can put your soul into another creature, are you experiencing reality objectively then, or is it just another form of reality? And is there an objective reality in the first place? Or do you need form to be able to experience reality? My favorite example is if you look at a clam. A bit of a grotesque image here, but you'll notice a clam has organs and features and parts, and it senses reality. It senses the world. It's alive. It doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have ears. So it doesn't sense reality the same way we do. But if you were to ask a clam, it would perceive that it's taking in 100% of reality, because that is all that it's ever known. If you could imagine putting eyes on a clam somehow and holding it up in Times Square, it would have a spiritual experience. It wouldn't know what to think, because this would be a brand new, entirely different universe or entirely different reality. Even outside of animals would be plants. Plants are alive. They don't even have the same sensory organs as clams do. They're further away from us and even insects. But plants can see color. Again, not see with their eyes. They don't have eyes, but they know which way is blue. And they know which way the sun is shining. It's been proven that plants can be affected by having color in their environment. They can even be affected by having sound in their environment, and they grow according to these things. Plants also communicate with each other. But this is so alien to our biology that we tend to imagine that we are alive and seeing reality objectively, and these other things, because they're not like us, are not seeing it. Although we depend on our eyes, I think more than any other sense, it's important to note that, and a lot of people know this, that we pick up only a very small percentage of the light spectrum, or the color spectrum, with our eyes. Machines can detect a very large amount of different kinds of light that we don't even see. And what's more jarring than that is that the fact that these colors exist in the first place is not because the colors are outside of our body to be seen by us with eyes. We actually create colors inside of our heads, inside of an amygdala in the back. All of the light you've ever seen and everything you've ever perceived happens inside of a dark area inside of your skull. Let's say you're looking at a sunset here, and it is purple and it is orange. Well, what you're seeing is purple and orange being created by the filters and synapses in the brain trying to make sense of the wavelengths that are happening outside of you. If you were not there to witness it, or if there was not a conscious agent outside to witness colors, it would be a form of wave. A wave radiation the same as you would have with sound. Light spectrums vibrating at a certain rate that only make sense as colors after they've been decoded and put in order inside the hemisphere of the brain that controls sight in the first place. So getting back to what is real, I might hold a guitar and say, okay, the guitar is real. I can prove it's real. It can be weighed and it can be measured. So it's objectively real. But what is a riff? Well, you play the guitar and riffs fly off of it. Little personalities, little pockets of personalities that fly off the guitar that you can perceive, that you can hear, and have a sound that remind you of something. It has an attitude. It sounds somber, it's sad, or it's happy. So we experience riffs, we experience music, and we have moods and we have these feelings. But what is music? And music objectively, without you putting your biology or your biases or belief system on it, is this: just octaves broken down into smaller sections and notes. So vibrations in the air that cause music are only this mathematical Fibonacci sequence of vibrations. It is us within our brains, just like the sunset, that we create these little personalities that fly off the guitar. It doesn't make them less real. We experience it. So I think it's important that we move our definition of what real means from objective things that can be measured and weighed to things that we experience. And I apologize for using the word objective so much in this presentation, but from here out we should probably start using the opposite of that word, being subjective, meaning what you experience specifically, not what is outside of you to be experienced, which is objective, but what is reality to you is subjective. You know, Carl Jung talked about the archetypes, these things that are very real and have been with humanity since we evolved, these ways of thinking that lead us to all have this incommonality sense of religions, myths, beliefs that rise from us having the biology that we do. And who better knows about the worlds within than the ancient Zen masters and the Buddhists of today? You'll notice in a lot of this Zen art, the subjects, the humans in the artwork are blended into the environment, because once you've adopted this way of Zen thinking, you are not separate from the environment anymore. You are the environment. All you are is part of the process. You're not the end of the process looking at the process. You are quite literally the process. And if you disagree with that notion, well, that disagreement literally also is the process. Zen is, of course, a very Eastern way of looking at the same thing that has been perceived by, say, Immanuel Kant and Schopenhauer, who were famous philosophers for the idea that the reality that we have within is completely distinct from the reality that exists outside of us, that everything we ever perceive is merely subjective. And these guys were talking about this after the Zen masters, but even before. Today we have the science now to seem to prove that things that we experience are not how they actually are. Today we have men like Donald Hoffman, who really inspired a lot of this video with his book, The Case Against Reality, Why Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes, where he brilliantly illustrates this idea with a metaphor that is a computer screen. So whenever you click on a desktop icon, that icon that leads to an email, of course, is not the email. It's a little colorful representation of that email. It doesn't show you the email, and it doesn't show you the hardware inside the computer that holds that email. And it especially doesn't show you all the ones and zeros in the code that form that email. Those ones and zeros are the objective reality of that email. And the hard drive, the machinery that it resides on, is a hard format of that reality. However, what we are looking at is a desktop icon, something that represents it so that we can get to it safely and accurately, something we can depend on. Because if we had to formulate a web page using the raw data, ones and zeros, we would be completely in the dark. We would be lost. But what our biology has done has formed the series of, as the metaphor concludes, icons for us to perceive things for survival. In the same way, if you were to move an icon into the trash can, it would cease to exist. In the same way that if we were to eat the berries that our biology has told us not to eat, we would cease to exist. Scientists will say, well, we want to shrink down and look at the atoms, and so we can tell what reality really is. But when they do that, Essentially what you're really doing is taking a magnifying glass and you look up at the computer screen and you say, oh, okay, I see what reality is. It's a series of pixels that form an image. But even then, as this metaphor so brilliantly illustrates, those pixels on your screen are still not the reality of the computer hardware that you are blind to. So according to Hoffman, what reality is actually just an evolutionary biological format to keep you procreating and being able to survive. There's no reason for our senses to show us reality as it is, if that even exists in the first place. The more and more science moves in this direction, the more it seems that there is no reality as being real. There is only the experiential perception of this mystifying it. This it that doesn't exist in the first place. The only thing that we have to grasp to is our current state and all of our former current states. That's what reality seems to be. If you were to try to describe the experience of vanilla, the taste of vanilla, that is something that is real. And when vanilla is on your tongue, you have a sensation of vanilla. But the actual vanilla, if you put it under a microscope, scrutinize what that actually is, you'll find this. This is a representation by picture, of course, so even this is not objectively what vanilla is. But if you look at it close enough, the objective reality of vanilla is this molecule, as opposed to the experience, the qualia, as they say, of the vanilla. However, this is not something that you can decode without having the taste buds to experience vanilla in the first place. Even though this last tidbit is enough potentially for a whole nother video, you can't have a Is Reality Real video without mentioning DMT. Users of which have reported experiencing entire other dimensions of being, things in 5D, 6D, colors they could have never perceived before, and creatures, intelligent non-human entities that are completely outside of their imagination before having used the substance that exists within us in our lungs and in every plant creature on Earth. The substance is truly unique and truly mysterious. Scientists have been working on finding out what it is, but that's for another video. What it pertains to this video is that users of DMT describe waking up into a world that is more real than real. They compare it to when you wake up from a dream. Well, that was a dream even though it seemed real, but now this reality is obviously real. It's like doing that again into a higher realm of being awake. And that begs the question, is that a closer way of perceiving objective reality than we have inside of our biological state in an ordinary fashion? Are there chemical doorways that strip us of our senses and belief systems and biases that somehow shine this light of a bigger objective reality to us, the same way that would happen if you were to put eyes and ears on a clam and hold it up in the middle of Times Square? Is this some sort of way to get the human self out of the body that is limiting the sensory abilities of the self and awakening it to this much larger universe that we can't perceive normally? If you look up DMT art, you'll find a lot of them have a lot in common. These fractal geometric patterns. They're very stark, very strange, and otherworldly, that seem to indicate some sort of mathematical, objective reality that is outside of our own sense-making that happens within our heads. So an overall point being that don't be fooled by your emotions, your biology, your five senses, and your belief systems. Because objective reality, if it even exists in the first place, is far more abstract than we can ever imagine while we're inside of here.